welcome to Trails Worth Hiking, the show that brings you some of the most interesting backpacking and trekking routes in the world. I'm your host, Jeremy Pendry. In the first part of the show, we bring you the story and history of a trail. Then we tell you what it's like to hike the trail and how you can do it. On this episode, we go to the arid southwest of the United States to travel a multi-day, steep series of connected trails in the mountains that will take us through forests of pinyon pine, juniper, and oak woodlands, but with expansive views of the surrounding Chihuahuan Desert, as we go to Texas for the first time on this show to hike the Outer Mountain Loop in Big Bend National Park. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. I'd like to start by reminding you to buy your backpacking meals from Outdoor Herbivore. Outdoor Herbivore has delicious vegetarian and vegan backpacking meals, but as you know, you don't need to be vegetarian or vegan to really enjoy these meals. They're delicious for everyone. They are made with quality ingredients. They're conveniently packaged in boil-in-a-bag packaging so that you can just pour in the hot water and wait 10 minutes and dinner is ready. Listeners of Trails Worth Hiking get 10% off at Outdoor Herbivore with the discount code TWH10P, so TWH10P, like Trails Worth Hiking 10%. So go to Outdoor Herbivore now and check out their selection of backpacking meals. They have breakfast, lunches, and dinners, as well as snacks and desserts and other options, and bulk ingredients, so that if you want to make your own meals, you can do that as well. Outdoor Herbivore ships worldwide. So check out Outdoor Herbivore at outdoorherbivore.com and get 10% off with TWH10P. I also want to remind you about the June 2026 Highlander event in Big Bear Lake, California. As you know, I went to the event in 2025 earlier this year and really enjoyed it, and think it's a great event for those wanting to expand their community of hiking friends and have an experience with others who are like-minded in the mountains, backpacking. Highlander is a supported backpacking adventure so that food is provided. You only need to carry the food for one particular day at a time. And there's support with lots of events and programs. It's a really fun experience. And it's a great opportunity to come out to some of the really cool mountains in Southern California, and a good time of year to do it in June. So why not make a week of it and come out to the San Bernardino Mountains and Big Bear Lake and go backpacking on the Highlander event next June. You can get 20% off your registration with the discount code TWH20, so TWH20, on your registration for the Highlander Big Bear Lake event. If you want to check out Highlander in other parts of the world, go to their website and you can see the different events they're holding in different parts of the world. The discount code that I have available for you as a Trails Worth Hiking listener, though, is for the Big Bear Lake event in June, the event that I went to this past summer and really enjoyed. So check it out, Highlander Big Bear Lake, TWH20, for a 20% discount. All right, let's jump into this episode. Our guest on the show is listener Bryan Hargrove. Bryan hiked the Outer Mountain Loop in Big Bend National Park with two friends, and we'll hear all about that in our conversation. So why am I covering this trail, the Outer Mountain Loop in Big Bend National Park? Well, as you know, I want to cover as many states, regions, and countries as possible on this show. I think there's great backpacking opportunities in all parts of the world. So it's time we went to Texas. I've spent almost no time in Texas in my life, very little. But this is a very different terrain, probably from even that most Texans are familiar with. It's a desert and mountain terrain, and it's very remote. So it'll be something I think that even people who live in Texas will learn from and maybe be excited about doing. The hike is in the Chisos Mountains. They're a mountain range that's entirely within Big Bend National Park. This is the only mountain range in the United States entirely within a national park. The range was created by volcanic activity about 35 to 45 million years ago. Its highest peak is Emery Peak at 7,825 feet, which is about 2,385 meters. We'll talk in a moment about the desert plants in this area, but in the Chisos Mountains at the higher elevations, there are also quite a few trees. There's pinyon pine, there's red oak, there's juniper, there's madrone, aspen, Douglas fir, ponderosa pine, and bigtooth maple, among others. They call this kind of environment a sky island because it's sort of a separate ecological environment, even within a desert environment that is very different from it around it. And that's because of the altitude of the mountains sticking up above the surrounding desert. The Chisos Mountains and Big Bend are in the Trans-Pecos region of Texas, which is in far west Texas, west of the Pecos River. It's the most mountainous and arid portion of Texas. It's very sparsely populated in this part of Texas, other than the metropolitan El Paso area. So El Paso is really the only sizable city in the area. The entire area is also within the Chihuahuan Desert. The Chihuahuan Desert is a large desert in the southwestern United States and northern Mexico. It's actually a sizable portion of northern Mexico that's within this desert. It's the largest desert in North America. It has several mountain ranges besides the Chisos Mountains, including the Sierra Madre, the Organ Mountains, and the Guadalupe Mountains, among others. And these mountain ranges create a sort of basin and range effect, like we've previously talked about in Nevada with the Ruby Crest Trail episodes we did a while back. And so again, these mountain ranges create this island-like effect out in the desert where you have different plant life, different animal life, potentially more water than on the desert floor, though as we'll see on this particular hike, there's not much water. The Chihuahuan Desert is between two mountain ranges that give it the shadow effect that prevent it from raining very much there. There's the western Sierra Madre on the Pacific side, and there's the eastern on the Gulf side. And these two mountain ranges create the rain shadow effect that makes it a desert. When there is rain, it comes in summer during the monsoon season. The Chihuahuan Desert is a very biologically diverse desert, though there has been environmental degradation in the last 150 years or so due to overgrazing. Some of the plants you might find in the Chihuahuan Desert include the creosote bush, acacia, salt bush, tar bush, broom dahlia, yucca, rainbow cactus, barrel cactus, mesquite, acotillo, prickly pear, candelia, lechuguilla, and others. And one thing to note is these plants aren't all found together necessarily because there's lots of different elevations throughout this desert and different soil patterns. So the plants really vary depending on where you are in the desert. The desert is from 1,500 feet to 6,000 feet in elevation. So that's about 480 meters to 1,800 meters. So it's quite a bit of variety of altitudes throughout this desert. Notably, though, the Chihuahuan Desert is a higher elevation desert than the Sonoran Desert to the west. Big Bend National Park borders Mexico. As we said, it's in West Texas. It's the largest protected area in the Chihuahuan Desert, and it's named after the bend in the Rio Grande River, which is the border between Mexico and the United States. Big Bend National Park is the seventh largest national park. It's 1,252 square miles, which is larger than the state of Rhode Island. It has sea fossils and dinosaur bones. 135 million years ago, it was underwater and was part of an ancient sea. It has a long history of Native Americans living in the area. There were originally nomadic tribes in the area, even up to more than 10,000 years ago. In more recent times, there were the Chisos and a nomadic people called the Jumano people. Those peoples may have been enemies, not entirely clear. But beginning in the 18th century, the Apaches came to the area and displaced other native groups, including the Chisos. The Comanches also used the area. They used it as part of a route that they followed to come down and raid villages in Mexico, and came from the Great Plains and came through the area. The first European noted in the area was Álvaro Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. The last name Cabeza de Vaca means cow's head. Interesting last name. Cabeza de Vaca was one of the first Spanish explorers to set foot in what is now Texas. He ended up there as a survivor of a shipwreck in 1528 near modern Galveston, Texas. He, after that, ended up enslaved by Native Americans for several years. He and 3 other Europeans eventually escaped and ended up walking through what is today Texas. He essentially spent years wandering the area and eventually did come to appreciate the native tribes that lived there and served as sort of a faith healer to those tribes. Eventually, he finally got back to Spanish-controlled Mexico, and then in 1537 sailed back to Spain. In the 1700s, the Spanish built forts in the area called presidios to protect the northern frontier of Spanish Mexico. The presidios were needed because the Comanches, as I mentioned before, were coming down and raiding villages. So they built a line of forts to protect the population. After the Mexican-American War ended in 1848, the U.S. Army built forts in the area, also to protect against native attacks. Many of those soldiers were African-American, the so-called Buffalo Soldiers. And then in the 19th and 20th century, there were mining and timber interests in the area. Big Bend actually started as a state park, created by Texas in 1933. The United States acquired land in the area in 1935, and then both the state park and the additional land acquired by the U.S. became a national park in 1944. Big Bend National Park is one of the most remote national parks. It's one of the least visited in the United States. It averages less than 500,000 visitors annually, whereas some of the more popular parks average more than 10 million visitors. There's a variety of animals in the area. There are mountain lions, there's coyotes, and roadrunners. Yes, you got to have roadrunners if you have coyotes, don't you? For those of us that remember our cartoons from back in the day. There's the kangaroo rat, there's the golden eagle, gray fox. There are black bears, which Bryan will talk about, have actually returned to the area. There's also the collared peccary, which is also called the javelina, which is an animal that looks to us like a pig, but is actually not part of the pig family of animals. It's a native animal that is pig-like. Because of its remoteness, Big Bend National Park has been named an International Dark Sky Park. It has some of the darkest skies in the contiguous United States, and is part of the Greater Big Bend International Dark Sky Reserve, which is 15,000 square miles. It's the largest dark sky certified place in the world. This area contains the McDonald Observatory, which is a telescope that was originally constructed in 1939. Then there was a bigger and newer one added in 1969. In 1975, Texas actually passed legislation that allowed local counties within 75 miles of the observatory to pass outdoor lighting restrictions to protect the darkness of the sky. And originally, just the county where the telescope was in passed regulations. But then there was a third telescope built in 1997, a more updated and bigger version. And then counties in the surrounding area began restricting outdoor lighting as well. Recently, they've had to step up efforts because of oil and gas interests in the area. And there has been some collaboration with the oil and gas companies to help them figure out ways to manage their operations using less outdoor light. Dark sky certification is something granted by an organization called Dark Sky International, by the way, which is a nonprofit advocacy group. Because of its remoteness and lack of people in the area, there have been some stories about supernatural goings-on in the park area. One travel guide company called Big Bend America's creepiest national park. There have been reported ghost sightings. There's the abandoned Langford Hot Springs Resort. There's Bruja Canyon. Bruja is the Spanish word for witch, where there have been reports of hearing sounds of a woman wailing. And there's the mysterious grave of Juan de Leon. He died in 1932 at age 26. And when they found him, his body was already decomposing, and they didn't move it because of that. And they ended up putting the grave right where he was found. So think about that. Instead of getting buried in a family plot with loved ones, once you die, they just put up a grave marker right on the spot and leave you there. Well, that's what happened with Juan de Leon. And he apparently died from a gunshot wound, but nobody knows why or by whom. So it's stories like this, I think, that give a little credence to the idea of Big Bend having some creepiness to it, or maybe some supernatural goings-ons. In any event, with that background, let's jump into my conversation with Bryan Hargrove about his trip to Big Bend National Park on the Outer Mountain Loop. Bryan Hargrove, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Jeremy, glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, Bryan, you started backpacking when you were fairly young, but then you took a really long break from it and have come back to it later in life. Tell me about that.
We had a church youth group, and I had a pastor. His name was Jim Miller. He was very much into the outdoors, and he loved rock climbing. He loved backpacking. We did some mountaineering, and he was just a really good mentor. And so we got involved in that, and kind of by default, my dad became one of the sponsors that went on the trips. And so it became a family thing. And for probably about a 7 or 8 year stretch from junior high all the way till a year after high school, that's what we did. We went backpacking all over, and then, went to college, got busy trying to build a career, having family, and it just got away from it. And then I had a friend of mine, and when he turned 50, he said, "Hey, I want to go on a big backpacking trip." And I was like, perfect. I looked at it as motivation to get in shape. And we went out to a place in Arkansas, had a wonderful time. It was really hard, but it was that kind of thing where you got done with it and you're like, okay, can't wait to figure out when we're going on the next one.
Type 2 fun, as they say.
For sure. It was. It was. The irony is we've been back to that place 6 times or 5 times since, and it just gets easier every time.
So that's great. So you're actually going quite a bit now. You've gotten back into it kind of full force.
Yeah, I think that we're taking at least 4 trips a year, one for every quarter. That trip in Arkansas, Jeremy, it just became after we got done with it, we said, hey, we're coming back here every year and just make it an annual event.
That's awesome.
And then we just started adding some other trips along the way.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the Outer Mountain Loop in Big Bend National Park in Texas. So tell me about how it came about that you learned about that and decided to go do that trail.
Well, Texas is known for a lot of things. Great backpacking is not one of them. And so we have very limited options on what you can do. There are some big mountains which surprises some people. I think our tallest peak is the Guadalupe Peak, and it's 8751. And so we went and did that as a day hike to be at the highest point in Texas. And then looking for something the following year, we were, you know what, Big Bend's the most iconic place in Texas from a national park. And we started trying to figure out a way that we could put together a loop that would match kind of what we had done in Arkansas. And so we found a 30-mile loop. They said it was the hardest hike in Texas, and we couldn't wait to get in the middle of it.
Okay, so you learn about this really difficult hike, and you think, well, that's cool. I want to try to do the hardest hike in Texas. What do you do to figure out how you're going to do this?
Well, I'm pretty technically savvy. And so very quickly, so much had happened in the 30-year break between when we went backpacking, from the equipment to the gear, so much different now. And just even, adding the technology part into it, I was pretty familiar with Gaia and had, used it to do some mapping things. But going to the National Park Service website, and that's the recommended route that you can take for the Outer Mountain Loop. And so we kind of just used that template and then, made little customized changes to what we wanted to include.
You mentioned we, so who did you hike this trail with?
I have a friend of mine. We actually competed against each other in high school in basketball.
Okay.
We were at different schools. When we were going to college, we wound up working at the same place and became really good friends and have been lifelong friends ever since. Through him, we met another guy. His name was T.A. He's been a friend of ours too, and we took him on this journey. And so the three of us have kind of become this backpacking clan that go every chance we get.
That's great. So one of the things that's really interesting to me about this area is the actual geography of it and the geology of it, because for me, when I think of Texas, I don't think of what I think Big Bend National Park is like, because it's actually right across the border from Mexico, and you've got the Rio Grande there, and it's a desert environment and a mountain environment mixed together. Really interesting mix of environments. Can you talk a little bit about what this place looks like and how it feels to be in this environment?
I guess the first thing about it is very remote. It's 45 miles from the closest town. It's 200 miles from the nearest airport and 300 miles from the nearest big city. And so you're in a lot of really flat, arid, ugly drive to get to the park. And then as you get to the entrance, it's probably, I think, 10 miles to the first ranger station. Then you start to see the mountains and you get that feeling like, oh, wow, where did this come from? And so it really is a very special place. I think it's the largest section of the Chihuahuan Desert, which is the largest desert area in North America. And it also is the only national park that contains an entire mountain range, and that's the Chisos Mountains. And those two things stacked on top of each other just make for a lot of fun when you're changing scenery and seeing new things every day.
What are the kind of animals that you might see in a park like this?
The first one that we encountered was one of the friendly blue jays, and you could get them to eat right out of your hand. And that was pretty cool. Shortly, we saw some deer. Surprisingly, Jeremy, they have black bears in the park. It's a population of about 30 or 40. They were hunted out of the park and did not exist for a really long time. And I want to say it was in 1980, they just reappeared, and they maintained that naturally. They didn't have to, do anything to reintroduce them. And those same populations been in the park since then.
And so you mentioned that this is kind of an arid region. This is the desert, even though it's a mountainous region. What's the season for doing this hike in light of the fact that you've got a mix of both desert and mountain environment?
For me, and I'm certainly more heat tolerant than my friends that go with, but anytime from October all the way through probably May, it's going to start getting warmer in May. It's about 10 to 15 degrees hotter in the mountain elevation than it is going to be at the, on the desert floor. But it gets super hot, and, it's easily over 100 degrees in that area during June, July. And that's also the time when I think they get the most of the rain. Then you have some dangerous flooding situations on a part of the section. And so anytime to me from really October all the way through the beginning of May is a wonderful time to be there.
So we've been calling this a loop, but to my understanding is, although it's a loop, there are different ways to do this hike. Could you talk a little bit about that? Are there different routes, or is it a series of other trails that are kind of connected? And how do you decide, or how did you decide how to do the trip and what route to take?
I had been to the park, Jeremy, before when I was backpacking a long time ago. And so I kind of had a little bit of familiarity with it. And I knew that including the South Rim was non-negotiable. That's the best part for the views. You're essentially looking straight down 1,500-foot cliffs into Mexico, and you see the Rio Grande River winding. It's really just awe-inspiring. And so I knew that I wanted, to include that. Then the other thing that you have to consider is that you have to either carry or cache your water. And there's only two spots that you can pick up water along the way. And so you kind of have to build your route to not do too much, but still be able to get to water for camping.
Okay, so on the first point that you raised about the South Rim, how much of an added mileage to the trip is it to go out to the South Rim and back?
Depending on how you do it, but for us, it was an extra 3 miles.
Okay, so that's not too bad for what's probably the best view on the entire hike.
Oh, to me, it wouldn't hardly be worth it if you didn't do that. It's really special.
Okay, and then on the water point, I wanted to make clear or make sure I understood. The way you're describing it is there are 0 natural water sources. Is that what people should expect? That there really is the only water they're going to get is what they start with and what they cache along the way?
There occasionally is water that you can find in various spots, but it's so unreliable that, it'd be crazy to try to plan on it. And so for us, we knew that we were going to do 3 days, and we were, conscious of backpack weight. And so we cached water in the two different spots that you could.
Okay, and so 3 days, 2 nights. Do you think that's a fairly reasonable pace for most people who would want to do this trip?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the national park recommends that it's only for experienced hikers. And one of the things that, as I was kind of getting prepared for, our discussion today, that I didn't realize only 50% of the people that start this hike actually finish it, because of that second day is just so brutal. So a lot of people, because there is a pretty easy bailout spot, it's very popular for people just say, you know what, we're done. And so that's kind of how we planned to make sure that we were going to be able to get all the way around.
What do you attribute the bailing out to? It sounds like maybe a few things. One is that you've got to carry a ton of water, and if you're not prepared for that, maybe you come up short. It also sounds like they give you an easy bailout, which can be tempting. And then I guess there's the heat and maybe the up and down, or is it all of these things? Or is there some reason you think that people end up not completing the trail?
The first day is pretty challenging because you're starting out at the trailhead, it's where all the action is in the park. I mean, it's where you have your main restaurants, hotels, shops, all that kind of stuff. And your views, the payoff is so great. As the further up you climb, the better as the views get. But I want to say that we did like 13 and a half miles that first day with 3,300 feet of gain. And I think my pack was right around 33 pounds. You're carrying some weight, and we're a group in our early 50s. And so weight is something that you really take into consideration. But that first day is taxing. We probably started around 8 o'clock and we didn't finish until after dark. Then that next day, there's not a lot of views. There's not a lot of changing scenery. It's just kind of a death march, as one of the buddies we were with named it. If you don't have the foresight to look forward to day 3, which is amazing, then it's like, hey, I'm good. And I think that's what a lot of people do.
Which direction are you going? I guess it doesn't matter because that second day is going to be the second day either way if you're going for 3 days. But which direction did you do it and why?
We did it clockwise. That's what the national park recommended. And also, we knew that was going to be your biggest elevation gain and your furthest mileage. And so we kind of, wanted to knock out the hardest part first, and leave, easier days on the backside.
Okay. And so you've talked about caching water a bit. Tell me more about that. What's the specifics on where you need to cache water and how you do that here? It sounds like there's kind of a standard 2 locations and that you need to really make sure you have water at both spots.
That's right. Yeah. The Panther Junction, I think it's Juniper Canyon Road. It's only 11 miles, but it is an incredibly rough road where you're going up and down washes and river rocks and all the thorn bushes that scrape your truck. They recommend that you have 4-wheel drive or at a minimum a high clearance vehicle. You can go no faster than 10 miles an hour. And most of the time you're going between 5 and 10 miles an hour. So to get the 11 miles, you're talking about a pretty good time commitment to get out there and drop it. Then the other side of the park, it's part of the Maxwell Scenic Loop. And so you can drive your car to it, park, and then carry your water down and cache it. Both places had bear boxes, and you just would put your name on it, and then you'd also put the date that your hike was going to be done. So if you didn't get there, then someone else was free to use it as needed.
Okay, so it sounds like you need to really be there with plenty of time the day before to set up the water cache.
Absolutely, yeah. And even if you were to fly in or drive in, you're talking about hours to get to the park. And so I think that's the natural thing to do is to base camp, which is what we did. There's the main Chisos Basin campground. We camped there the night before, had got reservations, and so that we could leave from there, park our car without being charged, and do the loop and come back to the same spot.
Okay. And along the hike, are the campsites designated? Do you have to reserve them in advance, or do you basically have specific spots you can just show up and grab, or how does that work?
Yeah, they were very designated. And even when we were there, I guess we went the last day of January and then the first 2 days of February. They closed down the east rim because of peregrine falcons mating season, and that's their nesting time. And so they give them total privacy, and the section of that's closed. And so that affected how we kind of made our route around the South Rim.
Okay. You mentioned that there's a black bear population that's come back to the area in the last few decades. Are there special requirements for food storage because of that?
Because of the designated camping areas, Jeremy, bear boxes were available. And so you could lock up your food and feel safe about it.
All right. And so for navigation, this is established trails, I assume.
Very established. Yeah, they're very well maintained, wide, big signs, all that stuff.
Okay.
The only danger you have is getting the wrong one. I think there's close to 200 miles of trails in Big Bend Park. And so there's lots of intersections, and it's easy to get turned around.
And you're not following a trail that's called the Outer Mountain Loop. You're actually following specific trails that connect to each other, right?
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you have to know which ones you're going to take next.
Yep. And so we had, I told you we were using Gaia, and then we also had a paper map and compass if we needed it, which in this trip we did not.
How do you handle permits for this?
We reserved the base camp site on rec.gov to get that, secured. But you have to show up to a ranger station and apply for a permit in person, and then they're going to ask you all the questions to make sure you know what you're doing. You're not going to get in trouble.
Okay. We can talk about the itinerary now, are there any other logistical points that are worth talking about, or should we jump into what your 3-day itinerary looked like?
Yeah, I think that logistically, it's pretty straightforward for national park hiking. And so, yeah, let's get into the itinerary.
Okay. So day one, it sounded like, was a pretty hard day. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Day one, you've driven, I live in the Dallas area. The other two guys I'm friends with, they live just a little bit further east outside of Tyler. And so we had probably an 8.5-mile drive to get there. Left really early and, got our permits from the ranger station. We immediately went and found a campsite and got set up. And then we went and cached water and then ate dinner, prepared to go that first day. If you camp in the Chisos Basin campground, you've got a little bit, it's a half mile, but it's a pretty good climb right out of the jump to get to the trailhead. But, everyone's excited. We've been planning and talking about it. So that first day, even though it was 13.5 miles with, I think it was close to 33 gain, we felt good because we had trained for it. We knew that this was going to be hard. And so everyone was in good shape. While it was physically demanding, it was just fun, and so we made all the right turns and got to where we were supposed to be. We actually spent probably over an hour on the South Rim because there was a lot of other day hikers and, we just were hanging out and talking to people and enjoying beautiful weather. It was a challenging day, but I think that no one really struggled. By the time we got to camp, we were ready to shut down pretty quick, but it was a fun day. And there are some flat sections, not very many. So it's a lot of up and then, the pointless up and downs and then back up
Yeah.
And all the way around. But the payoff for the views was so amazing that, you felt really energized that first day.
What's the rough mileage for that first day, including the South Rim detour?
It was 13.4 is what I clocked on my watch. And so if we did not do Emery Peak, which is the tallest peak in the park, that is it's about a mile. I think it's 1.5 miles one way and about 800 feet of gain if you choose to pick that up. But we knew we had a pretty ambitious day. And so we opted not to do that one because we knew we were going to include the South Rim.
What was the campsite like for the first night?
The funny thing is that you're hiking to your water cache. And so we had gotten to this big Caliche parking lot where they had a bear box. And, we're pretty spent at that time. It was already dark and, we're ready to get camp set up. But it's maybe another quarter of a mile down the trail. And they had a really nice camp spot that's in the bottom of the desert section.
And then day two, you said sounds like it was also a pretty difficult day.
Day two is a lot tougher, and it really had to do with the terrain. Essentially, you're at the very base of the South Rim, what you were looking at the day before, and it's 12 miles of just straight hiking, and you're going up a wash, through a wash, down a wash, over and over again. So you're walking on the little bitty river rocks. Even though it's 12 miles, you still gained 2,500 feet that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so after putting the effort on your legs the day before, you feel it. And since there's not a lot to look at and there's not a whole lot of excitement, it wears on you. It didn't bother me as much, but the guys I was with, they were not a fan. And one of them, my buddy in particular, he's like, hey, just leave me here and I'll figure out a way to come back. So we kind of had to encourage him to get to the end of the trail. Like, you can at least bail out at this point. But after a good night's sleep and some food, he saw it all the way through.
It's amazing what that can do for you, right? Just to get off your feet for a while and get some food in your stomach.
Absolutely. At the end of a long hike, your legs and knees and back and everything's kind of going, man, how am I going to do this tomorrow? But good night's rest and great food solves a lot of problems.
Yeah. So what was the campsite for the second night?
The second night, you're actually hiking to a historic ranch house. It's called Homer Wilson Ranch. It's been there forever. But there's some riverbeds that come through there. And so I think it was probably maybe a half of a mile off of the Dodson Trail. And that's where we were able to camp. And it was a nice campsite because you're kind of tucked in a little alpine meadow. And then you had the views from the base of the mountain that you were going to climb the next day.
All right. And so tell me about that. The third day, is it a full day or is this half day back or how does that work?
It was just under 10 miles and you were doing 2,800 feet of gain on that day. You're doing a pretty big climb. I want to say it's the one day for me, Jeremy, where you just had so many different zones that you were going through. That first section, you're kind of doing a little bit of the riverbed, washes. After a few miles of it, then you enter into this section where you're going through what almost looks like Utah, where they had like spires and red canyons, just absolutely stunning and something you wouldn't think. And then you begin climbing up, I think, which is essentially the East Rim section. And so it's a pretty aggressive climb. I remember that one of the cool things that happened on that trip is that, we could see a front system coming in and it was coming in quick and you're like, oh man, we could get in a little bit of trouble here. But that front came in just this giant cloud that was moving so fast and it slammed right into that face of the East Rim and bounced right back out the way that it came. And so that last day we had a pretty significant drop in temperature. I want to say that first day it was around the 80s. Maybe got to 55 overnight. When we woke up that next morning, the last morning, it was 40 degrees. And so it had dropped pretty good and it actually never warmed up. The temperature was going the other way.
So you need to be prepared for a pretty wide range of temperatures just in case.
Just in case. Yeah, I wouldn't say that you're not going to have the same. Well, I mean, we actually got snow and ice, which never happens. It was kind of funny that last day we were probably 2 miles or 3 miles from the trailhead, and there was this sweet elderly couple that was hiking in. And I remember the lady, she looked at me and she said, "Oh my gosh, did y'all camp out here?" And we're like, we're backpacking, and she goes, and she just said at the time, she goes, "That's amazing. The whole state is frozen." And of course, we don't have cell phone service, so we have no idea what's going on. It turns out that there was a pretty significant snow and ice storm that affected the majority of the state, which never happens. And so by the time we got to the trailhead, it was close to freezing and it was snowing, and they were saying that there was ice all over the roads. And so we're like, hey, we need to get a hotel. And yeah, you can't get a hotel. Well, everybody had canceled. So we're like, oh, we can grab a hotel. But after thinking about it, we're like, hey, if we get a hotel and we're here, we're stuck. And I said, let's at least try to get to Fort Stockton and then see what our options are. Made for a very interesting ride home. Normally it takes 8.5 hours. It took us 15 to get back, and we had to go from Big Bend almost to San Antonio to go north back to Dallas. It was exciting.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, sometimes the adventure can include the drive out and the drive back or the transportation, right? And so it sounds like you had almost as much adventure after the hike as during it.
That is accurate. Yes, sir.
So if others are thinking about good long weekend hikes, good 3-4 day hikes that they'd like to do, why should they consider the Outer Mountain Loop in Texas?
Well, for me, it's the best that the state has to offer. I think probably the coolest thing to me and what I remembered most from when I was, in high school was that it is so dark at the park. I think it's one of the national dark parks. And in fact, it has the lowest level of light pollution of any national park in the lower 48 states. And so
Wow.
the stargazing that you can see there is like nothing you've ever seen. That was what was so memorable of my trip when I was younger. And we got the exact same thing, just incredible sky views at night.
Was that the same thing as when you were younger? Was that the highlight moment of the trip for you? Or were there other moments that you'll think back on?
Yeah, I think that we were pretty tired at the end of the day, so I think that our stargazing on while we were on the trail is minimalized a little bit. I think that probably the highlight for me, Jeremy, was hanging out at the South Rim. You'd kind of really busted your butt to get to do something hard, and then you had the payoff with this great view. It was just that unique deal where the right people were up there that you just, we had a lot of people that were kind of doing the same thing we were, and just to sit and talk and, have fellowship was people all doing the same thing and talking about gear and, just kind of nerding out about backpacks, and we're saying, oh, well, this is the hike that we're doing. And people saying, oh, y'all are crazy for doing that. You just really had a great time just visiting with people.
Is there anything you would have done differently, or if you advised somebody else to do it, that would be different from how you did it?
I think that the only thing I would have done different was I would have spent more time there. There are a ton of things that you can do in that park. It just takes a long time to get there. Big Bend does not get nearly the amount of people that you see in the parks on the west or the east coast. I want to say that they only get 500,000 people a year is a really busy year for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can truly, even in a national park, get that sense of being out in the wilderness. There's the Santa Lena Canyon, which you can go down it, and it's 1,500 foot views and beautiful. There's couple of other really just epic hikes that you can do within the park. And so I think if we could have spent a few more days and knocked off some of those other things, that just would have only added to the value of the trip.
Bryan, thanks for telling us about your hike in Big Bend National Park on the Outer Mountain Loop. But while I've got you, I've got a few more questions if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
All right. What is one piece of gear you don't leave home without?
I do not leave home without darn tough socks. Since, I started getting back into backpacking almost 4 years ago, I've been able to almost hike 1,800 miles, and I have not had a blister, and believe that it's because of darn tough socks.
That is a great answer. I take darn tough socks with me on every trip as well. I have to tell you, the way I use them is a little different. I use them as my warm socks at night around camp. But then if it's a cold morning, I will wear them on the trail, but probably switch them out in the middle of the day because they're the ones I have are pretty warm. But I've never had a blister from them either, and they're fantastic socks. So I couldn't agree more with that. What's the one hike or trip that you've done besides this one that others shouldn't miss out on?
I think that my favorite hike that I've done, Jeremy, is 2 years ago. We went to the Gila Wilderness, and this was in 2024. And the Gila Wilderness was the first wilderness area that had been protected in the world. And so last year they celebrated their 100th year anniversary. It's just a fantastic place. And it truly is a wilderness because of the designation. There's no buildings, no structures, no roads. And we put together a 40-mile hike on it. So that was one of the coolest trips that we had. We just had unbelievable campsites, tons of access to water. and we were blessed with incredible weather. And, you got done with that hike, you're like, wow, we really did something. And had that, just that sense of accomplishment and pride in what you're able to talk yourself into doing.
Yeah, that's a good reminder for me. I've heard a lot about that area and I've never been there, so I have to move it up to the higher part of my list.
Then the other area that we've been to too is Wheeler Peak in New Mexico, which is
hmm
part of the Taos Ski Valley. And so when they don't have snow, that was an incredible, incredible trip too. And the cool thing about New Mexico is you can camp anywhere. I mean, they have places you just pull over on the side of the road, and they're pretty agreeable to letting people adventure outdoors.
All right, next question. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done while you've been hiking?
Okay, when I was 16, you have a lot of confidence, and you think that
Yeah.
you are a lot. I was convinced that I was, a mountain man at this point. Well, I went with my brother, my dad, and a friend of mine. We were camping in Los Maples National Forest, which is in San Antonio, or just outside of San Antonio. And we only had one 4-person tent, and it was super crowded. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not sleeping in here. I'm just going to cowboy camp. And I had a sleeping bag that, it was a good sleeping bag. And so I just took a air mattress and a sleeping bag and just cowboy camped out. Unbeknownst to me, the temperature dropped to 26 degrees that night and everything froze. And all I had was my sleeping bag and air mattress. And so I had to run back to the tent in my underwear in the cold weather. And I wish I hadn't have done that.
It's good to learn those lessons early, though, I guess.
Yep.
All right, final question. What is the most valuable thing that backpacking has taught you?
I've had a different perspective because, I'm assuming if I had done this for the last 30 years, I don't know that I would appreciate returning back to it as much as I do. And in today's world where everything is fast and people want things immediate and there's no patience in waiting for everything, the beauty of being in the backcountry and in backpacking is that, you can slow down and be present. I think one of the best perks for me is that cell phones don't work in a lot of the places that we go, and that's not by accident. And so just to unplug and really slow down and enjoy nature and experience, nature. And of course, being with friends and having real conversations that aren't distracted, it's almost a lifestyle. And it's one that I absolutely enjoy being a part of.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Bryan Hargrove, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me.
Thanks again to Bryan Hargrove for coming on the program. And I hope that we've inspired you to visit Big Bend and hike the Outer Mountain Loop. And if you've enjoyed this episode, tell a friend about it, or better yet, give us a good review on whichever podcast service you use. And keep in mind that this podcast is entertainment and meant to spark your interest. If you decide to hike the trail, do your own research. Like anything else worth doing, outdoor adventure has risk. So when you go, pack your common sense. And when you get back, tell me how it went. Coming up on Trails Worth Hiking, we'll have another update episode. In September, I hiked another trail we previously covered on the show. So I'll have an update episode similar to the one I recently did for Hadrian's Wall Path, where I gave you my take on that trail. This time I'll give you my take on a trail in the eastern United States. It was my first time backpacking in that part of the country and was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to telling you about that. Also, for our next new trail that we'll be covering, we'll also be heading east, but farther north to northeastern Canada, where we'll hike several days on a challenging route through a mountain range that has no trails. That's right, no trails at all. We'll follow a rugged and unmarked backcountry route that crosses a plateau of stunning alpine terrain and goes through a beautiful gorge as we travel the Long Range Traverse in Gros Morne National Park in the Long Range Mountains of Newfoundland, Canada. If you have any questions or feedback on this episode, or ideas for future episodes, including if you want to be a guest and talk about a trail you've hiked, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Trails Worth Hiking Podcast if you're not already doing so. On the Instagram account, I post pictures pretty much of all the hikes that we cover on the show and some other posts from time to time as well. So it's a great opportunity to see the hikes that you're hearing about. So that's it for this episode. So start planning your next hike. And before you know it, you'll be on the trail. Thanks for listening.